I was like, my antidepressants they cannot handle this. Need something stronger.
Cool. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the In Plain Sight. Is that our podcast name? IPS, Irritable Bowel Syndrome, episode, what is it now? 15, 16, 17, 18? Anyways, we're here. Matt just had his baby, so he's not with us, but we do have a special guest on with us today.
Matt.
Her name is Denise Lee, and Denise is joining us today as a former environmental scientist, right? Now turned software engineer. We met in App Academy boot camp, and we decided to have Denise on board with us today to share her experience as both a pirate and and a poacher in Africa. No.
And an environmental scientist. Also.
That's it. Environmental sciences in Africa. So, Denise, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and we'll get into it.
Yeah. Hello, dear listeners. I'm Denise. I was an environmental scientist for a few years. Started off doing, just some regular field biology, trying to figure out like what I wanted to do because I just had a general biology major. As an undergrad, I was a psych major at first and then for 4 years, my fourth year, second semester, I was like, hey, actually, I don't like this. So I crammed a whole biology major into my fifth year. And I lived to tell a tale. I'm really glad that I did it because I got to see the world with my biology degree. Got to see things that I always wanted to see. You grow up watching like nature documentaries and stuff, but I lived some of it, and it's pretty incredible.
What's your draw towards biology? Like, what do you like about it?
It's just like it's the natural world. It's all around us. It's amazing. I like to say that the outdoors are for everybody, even though because of social equity, that might not be true. But I feel like it really should be for everybody. And it's just, there's unicellular organisms, and then you got things like, that giant like fungal mat under the Pacific Northwest. And just such a variety of creatures to study.
So I'm curious.
Including, 10 who I met in App Academy.
So I'm curious, Denise. Most people with a bachelor's degree in biology don't go very far in that career. With just a bachelor's. Exactly. So how do you manage to travel the world, and where did you start after you got your degree?
Yeah, so I started off as just a lab tech for one of my professors. So we had like just one environmental science class in the general biology major, and I was really interested in how the effects of human activity, with society impacts the environment. So I took that class. He announced that he had an opening for a lab tech over the summer, and so I applied, and I did that it turned out to be a year. And my mom made me a bet after that year was up, like, bet you $200 that you can't get a job in 2 months. I was like, make that shit 2 weeks. So I got a job in 2 weeks. And I was looking at job postings on, I think it was like University of Connecticut's wildlife biology. Like they just had like a general like job board for field biology stuff. And I saw this fisheries observer position. I thought, well, I've never been to Alaska and I've never lived on a fishing boat before. So let's do both at the same time. Turns out I get seasick. What a way to discover that. It's like my first trip out on the Bering Sea. It's actually like pretty calm. And then I'm just chucking my brains out. So you're right in saying that like a lot of biologists don't really see too much with
action, period, right? They don't see a lot of action outside the lab, which is really cool.
It depends. It really depends on your field. So like with and it also depends on if you decide to specialize, how you decide to specialize, because it very much is just like inverted triangle, like, and you start off at the top like with so much that you can choose from, and then you get more and more specialized in your career. So that's why like a lot of career biologists, they get advanced degrees.
So I'm curious now. set the tone for us here, because you say a fishing boat. Are we talking about
Uh-huh.
Forrest Gump and Bubba Shrimp's
Uh,
fishing boat? Or are we talking about like a research vessel?
so not research vessel. These are commercial fishing boats.
Okay.
Think Deadliest Catch.
Yeah.
Except instead of crab, it's fish. So it's the North Pacific Groundfish Observer Program. And at the time, it's overseen by the National Marine Fisheries Service. And I think it still is, but they contract the labor out to observer employers. So,
So was your
uh,
boat full of researchers, or were you living
oh
with
no, I
longshoremen?
was the
Yes.
only woman and the only like scientist on the boat. And for me, because I wasn't on any big factory boats, the boats that are required to have observers at the time were, I think, 60 feet and above. So in places like Kodiak, where it's mostly like, smaller family joints, you get like the 60 to like 100 footers. And then in over in like Dutch Harbor, you get like the bigger boats. So like I think the largest boat I was on was like 200 feet long.
That's pretty cool. So when you came back to shore, did you smell like a longshoreman woman? No.
No, because well, it depends. Like, so when I fished out of Kodiak, yes, because the trips were like, 3 days, and a lot of times, like, the guys wouldn't shower, so the shower was used as storage. So I was like, okay, well, guess I'm not gonna shower for 3 days, covered in fish guts. But like, when you fish out of Dutch Harbor, it's really like kind of like a luxury experience. Like, it's big boat, you typically get your own room, or if you share a room, it's like a nice room. They have like, a washing machine on the boat. There's usually a crew member who's like a dedicated like chef. Some boats they have like, steak dinner every night.
Wow.
And in some boats in Kodiak, like you eat Captain Crunch.
Can you discuss at all like what the research was? Like what you had to do in the process?
Yeah, so it wasn't so much research as it is data collection. So with the groundfish fisheries, um, at the time, this is back in like 2011 to 2012 that I was working there. So it might have changed since then. Um, at the time, the quota for the fisheries is based on data from that NOAA collected during their summer trawl. So that's like official, like that's the research boat. They do a trawl across like a section of the North Pacific, and then they do
And a
some
troll is
data.
just like a slow moving kind of
It's just like,
a
yeah,
slow
giant
moving
ass net
yeah,
grabs
okay.
everything. They estimate biomass and they say like, okay, like these fisheries can only fish this much during this time. And there's also a limit on like bycatch. Like if you catch too many salmon during like the pollock season, then like you're shut down. You can't fish anymore.
Okay.
So my data in theory was used to as part of like those like fishing quotas.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it actually was because was just like grunt labor and like collected the data. And there's also like some biological data that I collected. So every like X number of hauls, I had to cut open like the skulls of the fish and get out their otoliths, which are the equivalent of like their ear bones, and they use that to navigate. So fish like sablefish or black cod, because they're mostly like, super deep, but it's kind of not very topologically diverse. Like, so it's like, super deep, but not a lot of like landscape around them. Their otoliths are not very complicated. Like they're very simple. Like it's just like a sliver. Whereas like pollock, because their life histories are so different, it's like a bigger chunk and it's like variegated too. So it's pretty neat to see that. And then other species, like depending on like what the boat is fishing, I'd have to collect sex lengths. So cut open the fish, determine the sex, and then measure the length.
So you were
And
doing this on like a ship that was moving, right? Like
ship that's moving, yeah. And when the crewmen are working, I'm working. So, boats that are working like 24/7,
that sounds difficult, like
it's
dissecting.
hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's like, especially like during the winter, you're like on deck. Oh, it's the worst. You're like sloshing around. Your like clipboard is frozen. Your hands are so cold. It's like super hard to like grip your pencil. You have to like cut open these fish. You have to weigh them. Yeah. So that's stuff I think like that, the otolith stuff that gets sent off to like a different division, like separate from the fisheries where they do like actual like research on it.
So Alaska couldn't have been all bad though, right?
It was, oh, let me
What
show
about the
you
Yeah.
some
views?
pictures. It was beautiful. I so here's from Dutch Harbor.
Wow.
Um, I think this might be called Humpy Cove. And actually, let me just open all these. Hold on, bear with me. Okay, so I believe this might be yeah, this is definitely Kodiak.
This is a colored photo, right?
Yeah, it's colored. So this is during the winter. I was only there, I only lasted one winter.
Looks very
It
depressing.
it was, and that's why I only lasted one winter. But this is the first summer
That's
I was up
gorgeous.
there. And this photo isn't mine. I believe it's either Jeremiah Newell's or Kyle Trablos's. So shout out to them, my observer buddies. And this is a pink salmon. So salmon natal home. So they're born and in freshwater, and they as they're migrating out to sea, the smells of their natal waters are imprinted into their brains. And so when they migrate back to their natal waters to spawn, it's partly magnetic sensing, and also just like as they have like olfactory sensors that pick up like the proteins and the scents of the water, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember this, like this is where I was born, so let me go back there and spawn. So this pink salmon is migrating upstream back to its natal waters. And so the fox aren't native to Dutch Harbor. I believe they were brought there by the Russians, so that there could be like a fur trade, and there's also wild horses on one of the islands in Dutch Harbor too.
Okay. Did you eat any of the salmon or did you just look at them?
So some of the fish, yes, like if there was cod bycatch on some of the boats, like they asked if it was okay to eat the fish, and like for me, I'm not like really like an authority person, like even though like I'm like a government official, I'm not there for enforcement. So if anything like weird happens, I'm supposed to report it, but like I don't do anything. But I think like with bycatch, like it's fine to eat, I
Mm.
hope. So yeah, so we ate some cod. It was like the best like fish and chips of my life. And there's this yellow eye rockfish it's so good. It's like if you cook it like just right, it's like so like buttery and it just flakes, and it's so good. I
Wait,
what's up?
why you say that? Is I heard rumors that Chilean sea bass are typically cod caught up in Alaska.
I'm not sure. I mean, it's possible. They could be like maybe like a rockfish or something.
Mm.
Because there is that like I remember like just hearing like over the years how genetic testing done on fish that you get like in the supermarket or in
Mhm.
restaurants. Not actually like what it's advertised.
Yeah.
So so yeah, so it's possible.
All right. Back to this cutie. This
Yeah.
fox.
Yeah. So fox were brought to Dutch Harbor many, many, many years ago as part of like a possible like fur trade. And here is the Russian church on the stream. And at the bottom, you can see some salmon that have already senesced.
Oh,
So
that
they've
is.
migrated upstream,
Huh.
and they've, spawned, they've dug their hole, they've spawned, and then they die because like migrating and spawning like just takes so much out of them. And you can see some like up here too.
Yeah,
So it's
definitely
actually
do.
like pretty cool that they bring in like nutrients from the ocean into like fresh water.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And
Freedom.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So bald eagles are like everywhere in Alaska, and I thought that was the coolest thing because I'd never seen one until I got up there. And in some places, like closer to the fish processing plants, they're like, we call them dumpster chickens because they just hang out at the plant, they stop grooming, they just eat all the discarded fish or the fish that's like left on deck. And they just get so gross, but they're huge. Like the females get really big, And the first time I saw one like up close, like maybe like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 meters away, I'm like, our boat is docked. There's some bycatch, like usually like jellyfish or whatever, they're left like on deck because the plant doesn't process them. So the boat can discharge them when they get like, I don't know, a few miles out to sea. So they're just like hanging out, like looking at all these jellyfish, and I like come out. It's like a morning in Dutch Harbor, and I just like I see all like the whole trawl alley is just like lined with bald eagles, and thinking like, oh, okay, maybe it's like a parakeet that I had when I was a kid. I like went up to it with my finger out, with
Oh
and then
no.
they have like giant like talons, and they just kind of looked at me like, like what the fuck, and yeah, uh, but it's pretty neat. Like they're just everywhere.
I heard they're not as majestic up there in Alaska as they are in the like southern states.
I think because they're so ubiquitous, like in certain areas.
Yeah.
But they are like there's so there's a post office in Dutch Harbor, and there's a sign outside of it, like because they're above the post office is a bald eagle nest, and they've been nesting there for years and years and years. And whenever there are chicks, the bald eagle parents will like dive bomb anyone coming into the post office.
Oh, that's
So there's
cool.
like a little like warning sign. Oh yeah, and you see like some blood in its feathers. And this is more of Dutch Harbor.
Cool.
So because it's tundra, it's not actual like it's not plants in soil. It's like a mat of like lichen and moss.
That is very
So
cool.
it's pretty neat. And a lot of Dutch Harbor is tribal land. Um,
What tribe is it over there?
I think it's I so the
Oh,
Dutch
oh.
Harbor is the port,
Hmm.
but on Alaska is like the city.
So it would
So
be like the Inuits, and then you,
I
you
think
mean like the
so.
okay.
I think so, but I'm not sure like what sub-tribe.
Hmm.
And here's like an old like
So,
derelict boat.
so got a question for you. Since it's
Yeah,
all
yeah, yeah.
tundra and
Hmm.
it's lichen and moss, right?
Uh-huh.
Have you ever rolled in it? Is it soft?
It's so I've gone on like hikes, and you kind of there are no trails, you just kind of just walk. Like you open your door and you just walk. And it's squishy.
That's
It's
cool.
it's kind of like that it's like those mats that are just like a bunch of like swirly um plastic kind of, it's like a squishy little mat. It's kind of like
Yeah,
that.
like little gym playground mat kind of thing.
Mm,
Okay.
more like kind of like those like litter mats that like they have like holes in it so that the litter like
Oh
like
yeah,
goes
yeah,
through
yeah,
for cat
yeah,
litter. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
kind of like that, but just 3 or 4 inches thick.
That's pretty neat.
So it's been well over 15 years since I went to Alaska, but when I went there, I remember seeing a ton of black bears, and I'm like seeing none in these
Oh,
photos.
so that's because I'm out in Dutch Harbor. So
Okay.
if you imagine Alaska as like an elephant's head, and then the trunk, so the Aleutian Islands are like the trunk part, and Dutch Harbor is
Okay.
probably like, I don't know, like a third of the way down.
I
Um,
see. Okay.
yeah, so no bears there. But here's like the trawl alley. So you can see that there's like some, so this is part of the pollock fishery, which is part of like the North Pacific fishery program. And there's like some salmon bycatch. I think these are Chinooks. But it's pretty clean, like honestly, like with how like so the pollock fishery is timed such that fishing is open when the pollock are most dense, and like when they're migrating like together, or when they're schooling up together. So it's pretty clean, like a lot of like those what's it called, those seafood watch what's it called? Those seafood watch pamphlets that are like, oh, don't eat this fish and only eat this kinds of fish. Like
Yeah.
that's
Uh-huh.
it's bullshit. It's such bullshit.
Well, pollock is basically what the industry uses for like fish fillets
But
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
artificial crab, right?
McDonald's. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Surimi. Yeah, 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 yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like it's just tons and tons of fish. Like I think the largest bag I've seen was like 100 tons.
Wow.
That's like on the smaller end. And this is just like a catcher boat. That's not like a catcher processor. So catcher boats, they catch the fish. It goes into like a refrigerated seawater hold. And then within 72 hours of landing their last bag, they have to go back in. Um, But with catcher processors, they can be out at sea like indefinitely until they're full, because they catch the fish, they process it on deck or on board. That includes anything from like, into surimi, or just like turning it into fillets and like freezing it. And so catcher boats, like they could be a crew size of as small as like, 4 or 5. Catcher processors, like probably around like 100, 150 or so.
Wow, that is insane.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is my ignorance of what the biomass is really like in the ocean, right? How do we
Mhm.
sustain this as humans to constantly catch as many fish and consume as much as we do and still
Oh,
pull this much in on a regular basis?
you, I'll just say that the 2050 estimates I think are too generous,
Ugh,
and that I am just eating whatever because I know that someday I won't be able to eat it.
yeah.
So we can't sustain it. We can't
Are
sustain it
you
at the
saying
levels.
Seaspiracy was right?
I haven't seen it, but I just know that, like, when they say that there's plenty of fish in the sea when you're giving dating advice, eventually you're gonna have to just say you're sorry, dude.
Oh, that's terrible. I saw this documentary last week about this new fishery that China had built. It was like this. It looks circular, and they put it in some northern EU country's water,
Okay.
and it's a fishery, so they actually breed and raise fish
Oh,
there.
so aquaculture,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
So it was pretty neat to see how they were doing that, and I don't know how that would impact the environment around where they put
Oh,
those
yeah.
those
It's
rigs.
um it's pretty bad. So you think about like factory farms
Hmm.
in like on land, it's pretty much the same how like you have all these animals in an area and animals excrete, they shit and they piss.
Yeah,
Well, fish are the same. And when you have, animals, high density animals in a small area, there's a lot of like disease that gets passed between them. And so, you have to like account for that. And so, like, disease animals that affects your bottom line. So then you have to like give them antibiotics. But then, because it's not like a contained
yeah.
like environment, like it'll diffuse out and then it impacts, the native species. So it's not great, you
Do you
know.
know if like the natural areas can deal with the high density ammonia and nitrates and nitrites in those type of fish farms?
Well, as a former environmental scientist, I would say the solution to pollution is dilution. So like it depends on what you mean by like deal with it, right? Because like eventually, the currents will come and they'll take it
Right.
away, but then you're constantly like excreting. So that's like, part of the problem. That, it's just you're constantly dumping in all this stuff that really shouldn't be there. But so it kind of just depends on like how you look at it. Like I would say like no, this isn't great because like I imagine I see it more from like a natural um from a natural perspective, like this isn't supposed to be here. So why is it here? You're introducing all these like species that shouldn't be here most likely. Because I think like in Canada they are or they were they had Atlantic salmon that were they were being farmed in the Pacific. So, sometimes they would escape, and then there was, possible like hybridization with like the Pacific salmon species and like what that means for the Pacific salmon's fisheries, especially since so many of them are like endangered, like what they outcompete, what they hybridize. Um, so it's not great, but like what can we do besides tell people to consume less?
It's one thing to hear people say on TV that we're going to run out of our natural resources within the next 50 or 100 years versus somebody that I know telling me I'm not going to have tuna
Yeah,
again by
yeah.
2050. Like it hurts. It
Well,
sucks.
yeah. I mean, like, tell your kids now what scallops taste like. So that, one day they can tell their kids, like, hey, we used to eat these things that, when you draw a mermaid and you put them on their boobies, like that actually used to be like an animal.
So what's this tube right here, Denise? Is that a vacuum?
It is, yeah, it's a pump, and I think what it's doing, this is a water pump. So
Okay.
fish come out, They come out of the, actually I can annotate. All right, I think this is okay. So here's like the trawl alley, right?
Mhm.
And the trawl alley, so that means like the stern is back here. And so the fish need to go this way, and usually there's like a hold, like they're just like basically like holds down here. And to get the fish from the back to the front, they're just hosed down because you don't
Okay.
want to like, aggressively like shovel them in.
So that's pretty cool. So the bycatch, do they just go into the holding to until y'all
Yeah,
get back? Yeah.
depending on what it is, actually, I can show that. So there's this summer was kind of weird. There was actually like not like the pollock wasn't as dense. And that was like kind of worrisome. Like there were a lot of like dead days of like just sitting in port, which was like cool for me because I get paid either way. Like once I'm deployed, like I collect a check, but it sucks for the fishermen because like they're instead of 250,000 that they're making that summer, they're only making 220.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so
Each, right?
yeah, or per year, I think,
Oh.
depending on like what kind of boat you're on.
So,
Um,
uh, what's the coolest bycatch you've seen when you've been on one of these boats?
Definitely like the salmon shark.
Oh, that is so
Wow.
cool.
Yeah, so they're related to great whites. Like you can kind of see it in like the way their like head is shaped. And when you open like their jaws, um, like it has that like extendable like jaw that you see with like great whites. Because like those close-up shots of when the great white mouths the camera, how it like extends its jaw a little bit.
Yeah.
So they do that too. Um, and that was definitely
How
the
did that
coolest.
get there? That looks like
S-
it's inside someplace.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so let me head back to let's see. Let's go to the previous one
And that
because
is that
it's a
its natural coloring or is that blood that we're seeing on
I
that
think it's
shark?
blood. It's
Okay,
it's been in the net for probably like, 8 hours.
I see.
So it just ends up in the net, basically. Like the trawl net is sometimes as wide as like, a football field. And it just grabs whatever is in its way. And there's salmon sharks, and we do have like some salmon bycatch, and they probably like, they probably eat other kinds of fish too. So yeah, it just like gets caught in it. And there's like, a lot of jellyfish, um, some depending on like, where you're trawling in terms of like the depth, you get different things. So like with cod, Pacific cod, you have to trawl the bottom. And if you trawl at night, you'll just get all halibut and then you'll be shut down, can't fish anymore. You've met your halibut quota. But you do get like, a few in like the rockfish and the cod. You get some like, halibut bycatch in the rockfish and cod. But that's all like calculated. Like, as an observer, I would have to count the number of like, halibut that you get. Um, and and then like, just like kind of estimate like the volume of the what's it called? Of the net.
So how long ago was this, Denise?
This was I started in July. I started training in July of 2011, I think. And so this was probably like September 2011.
Okay. You said you only did one winter, right?
Yeah, so I only did a year of of fisheries
Okay.
biology.
I'm curious. And other than things that you see in the net, just because I don't really know about that area in Alaska, do you get to see things like whales and other?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't have any pictures of those, but in Dutch Harbor, there's like a known humpback whale
Mm.
population.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, it was so cool to like, so you get calls in my room like, hey, like, we're approaching Dutch Harbor, like, do you want to come see it? Because it was like my first time pulling into the port, and just getting into like the cap, like the bridge basically, and just looking out, seeing um Dutch Harbor, and like just seeing like all these giant like humpback whales like breaching, and just like breathe, just like living their lives
So
basically.
before we like move away from Alaska and
Hmm.
any, I know I'm asking all the questions. I'll give it back to you in a second. Uh, 2011. as a society in the United States, we've progressed tremendously over the last 11 years, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
How was it for you as a young woman to get onto these boats with these
Right.
gritty, salty
Right.
men?
Right, right, right.
What was that experience like for you?
Well, my best friend, she was like, "Is your life like a porno? Like you're the only woman, you're out at sea. They must be so horny." And I was like, "I'm here to work, not to get worked." And but like because like, as like someone who's, younger and like more aware of like how the world has changed, versus like, the fishermen where they're surrounded by dudes all day. And it's still very much like that, like kind of like I'm gonna say misogynist culture.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like it's very isolating because like in training, like you're told like, hey, women, like you need to establish your boundaries and you need to establish them like as soon as possible. So it was honestly like very lonely. Because not only like am I out at sea, but also like, I can't like intellectually like connect with these people just because we're so different. Like there were some fishermen who I'd say like, okay, yeah, like we were friends. But for the most part, like it's lonely because like you're an outsider and they know that like, you're the term is like JAFO, JAFO, just another fucking observer. Like you're there for the trip, the season, whatever, and then you get replaced. Like and you're probably never gonna be seen again, except maybe like in town at the bar or whatever. So it was like it was super lonely.
Wow, must have been rough.
It
Um,
was, and that's why I only lasted a year. I was like, my antidepressants are, they cannot handle this. I need something stronger.
I'm really curious about what you do after this, but Andy, you want to get any questions out?
I was actually kind of curious, like, if is was solitude the hardest part of the job, or what made you after a year go, you know what, I just can't do this again?
It's like the solitude, and it was just so hard, like physiologically, like emotionally. And like, I'm out like when the fishermen are working and they work in crazy weather, I'm working too. So the winter that I worked was the coldest winter they had in 17 years. And you still need to lift your baskets of fish, you still need to cut them open, you still need to, collect all this data. And I remember being like so cold that like I wasn't warm until spring, basically. I was
Wow.
just
Wow.
cold for so long. I would wear like a base layer, sweats, another pair of pants over that, and then like my rain gear, and still like it was not enough. And like, I would
Was
wear like a hat.
communication hard outside of the ship? Like, was there not, like, Netflix or Skype or anything like that?
Oh, so some boats they had like a satellite internet.
Mhm.
So you could like get, I don't know, maybe like 3G or something, equivalent of 3G. So you could like, text at least. But for the most part, that's the part I liked is that like you're like totally disconnected. A lot of boats,
Oh.
they would like they would just have like libraries of um like DVDs. What's cool in Dutch Harbor is that and Kodiak, there's like a public library. So you could like, check something out, go out, go out fishing, come back, turn it in, grab something else. But I read a lot and that was really nice.
Th-
And go ahead.
that's pretty amazing going from a person who loved to disconnect to becoming a software engineer. So, so
uh, I what I say about myself is that I'm either 0% or 110%. So it's either I'm totally disconnected or I'm like terminally online, and I am in like the terminally online part of my life.
so where did you transition after Alaska?
Yeah, so what's great about the Observer program, especially for like college graduates, is that you don't have to pay for room and board. Like when you're living on a boat, whatever you make, you bank. So after I did it for a year, I had saved up enough where I was like, you know what? Like I've always wanted to go to Africa. I've always wanted to do like, wildlife research. Let me see if there's a PhD student who needs like free labor more or less. Because in biology, there's not a lot of funding. So a lot of labs will say like, hey, we can't pay you, but maybe we'll put your name on a publication. It's the same thing of like, we can't pay you, but you'll get all this exposure.
Yeah.
It's total horseshit and exploitative, but it is what it is. So I um I just put out some feelers. I knew I had a former GSI who did her PhD on disease transmission as it relates to ecology in Namibia. So I asked her if she knew anyone because she had previously worked in Africa. So and it was like a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. And I interviewed with them when I was still in Alaska, and I thought like, okay, like I could make no income for a year and it wouldn't be like a big deal because I was young, stupid, so stupid. I still had health insurance. And I just thought like, when you're like that age and like fresh out of college, like it's like a kind of like a beautiful, stupid time because you're like, I have the rest of my life ahead of me to make money.
Wish Matt was here.
I have the rest
That
of
was
my
probably
life
a
in
little
front of me to
awkward.
make money. I could do what I could follow my dreams. So dumb. I should have dreamed of making money. But it is what it is. So after I did that, after I was in Alaska for a year, I got a position as a research assistant as for a wildlife conservation program. And my project was examining camera trap data. So within certain national parks, depending on like where you are in sub-Saharan Africa, there are water holes. Some are artificial, some are natural. We wanted to look at how they're being used by the wildlife, like and like are like activity and presence of certain species around the water hole, is that impacting activity and presence of like other species, like so like it logically follows that if a lion shows up, some prey species probably aren't going to like show up with them, right? Like, but is there a lag time, and like is it seasonal, like is it impacted by like rainfall? So I did some camera trap data, and I can pull up some. There's one cool thing. Sorry, I just remember that there's something else that I wanted to show. Um, Give me one.
While you're looking for that, you had mentioned earlier a GSI. Are you talking about like global
Oh,
systems information?
sorry. Graduate student instructor.
Oh, way off.
Yeah, so close, but not quite.
Uh,
Old hard drive. Okay, seed images. Here we go.
How long were you in Africa for?
It was pretty short. It was only a few months.
Okay.
So I intended to be there for a year, but it didn't work out. So here you can see some wild dogs down here, and I have like a longer series on them in a little bit. And this is at one of the, I think this is an artificial water hole. So there's like an underground pump that's pumping up water.
mm. Do they all use it?
What do you mean?
Like, all, well, I've seen some of your pictures. I've seen like a whole slew of wildlife come to this
Yeah.
water hole. So I'm guessing they installed it because, well, I don't know. Why did they install the artificial water hole?
Some of it for tourism, like, okay, let's get a resource that all wildlife needs, and that way, let's put it near like, a driving path, so that way like tourists can come and they can see wildlife.
Where were they drawing the water from?
Some of it's just like from an underground well or
Okay.
like aquifer.
Okay.
Oh, you can actually see the pump right here.
Huh, interesting.
And I think it was, yeah, they're solar powered, so when it's cloudy, like no water comes out.
Hmm.
And this is
Oftentimes,
actually,
when I hear about like scientists out in the field, they're often take the approach that they don't want to interfere with the wildlife itself. But it sounds like you guys took more of a proactive role with the wildlife. Is there like a split amongst the scientific community, or is that just something that this was what you guys were in there to do?
so with the camera traps, it's kind of like a balance between like observing but not being there, like letting wildlife be observed undisturbed. So we just installed the traps. Um, if you look at the top here, it says M2 of 3. That means emotion triggered the trap to take a burst of 3 photos, and this is the second one. They did before, like, the researcher before me who worked on the project did try to do like 48-hour surveillance at a water hole. I'm very glad that he was the one who did that because there was no way I could last 48 hours in like just like out in the wild, like basically living in one of like the research trucks, looking at wildlife. I'd be like, but I want to like shit indoors. I can't do this. Um,
Wait.
so
How was your experience shitting outdoors in Africa?
so I only peed outdoors, and
Okay.
it was basically like a cat. Like, it's sand, so I just like if I was driving, I'd just be like, "Hey, I gotta pull over," and don't look. I mean, like you can look if you want, but you might be traumatized. And then you just like you go behind the truck, and I like dug a little hole, and I like squatted down, and I made a little TT, and then like just buried it, and then you just drive
Like that
off.
girl in chat, then.
What?
It's like that
Oh,
girl in
yeah,
chat
that's
in the
right.
trail.
That's right. That's right. We were ultra running, and one of the runners decided instead of going into the woods, she
Uh-huh.
would just drop her pants while we're running past her
Uh-huh.
and just do her thing. And
Oh yeah,
everybody
I
On the
did
else.
that.
uphill
I did that
climb.
during the Malibu triathlon a few years ago. I was like, fuck it. I'm never gonna see these people again. I'm just gonna do it.
Oh,
I
you know,
didn't know you were into fitness. So how do you keep up with your fitness when you're like on a ship in Africa, or I mean on a ship
ship
in
in Africa.
Right.
Alaska or
You
in
don't. I
Africa?
mean, well, part of it, like, so as a fisheries observer, like you're just like lifting heavy stuff all the time, like baskets full of fish, you're like, and part of like being on deck, like being active and like, always moving around, moving stuff around. Um, and the boat is moving too. So your like core gets pretty strong. And like for me, like I don't know, I just kind of like didn't maintain it.
Okay.
It's like
Okay.
whatever. I'm young. Like it'll be fine. My body's robust. Um, but but when we were like on land, because that first summer we were on land for so long, like I would just walk to the pool in Dutch Harbor and like go for a swim.
Okay.
And that's how one way did it. But in Africa, like you can't run because it's sandy, and you can't go for a run because you might die because something will attack and kill you. Um,
Big factor.
and yeah, so I was just like, okay, well, whatever.
Well, you might run faster. I mean, think about the PR. If you're thinking you're going to
It's not
die the
about
whole
running
time.
faster. It's running faster than someone else, like in
Right.
that situation.
So, okay, we got any bigger animals, Denise? I know we want to see some big animals.
Yeah. Hold on. I just wanted to show you like some diversity. So here's I think this is an eland, and it's kind of like I don't know, like a cow kind of thing.
Does not look like a cow to me.
Kind of like it's the
So
most like
let's.
analogous that we have in like North America.
So is it much further than like an antelope? Because
I would say very different from an antelope.
okay,
Because antelope they're much smaller.
I see these are
And
pretty big
yeah, these are
bodied.
pretty big, like
Yeah.
lumbering. And then these are oryxes, or they're also called hemsbok. And they're like kind of like horses too.
Huh.
These long, so I've only heard the story, but apparently there was like a really like beautiful large male lion that was like, local to the area, but he ended up dying because he got like gored by a hemsbok.
Jeez.
But what a way to go,
You said
right?
these
Like,
these are called hemsbok.
yeah, well, it's spelled with a G, but pronounced hemsbok.
Okay.
Or oryx, Oryx.
Now we have some type of oryx in the United States, right?
Maybe you're thinking of Orkin Man, the Terminator.
No.
Mass
So
extermination.
out in New Mexico
Uh-huh.
and West Texas, and I think Arizona, I know we have a couple of types of antelopes and a couple, maybe an oryx out there. Of course they're not native, right? It's just they drop them out there and let them breed so that they could have more
They can hunt
game.
him. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, these things are cool. So where you were, they created this water hole for tourism, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Did they do a lot of hunting out here?
Actually, no. And what's really neat, and I can show some game drive photos. Some of, oh, actually, no. This isn't in the right photo. There's no hunt, like I think it was like outlawed like within the past, like I don't know, like 50 or so years,
Oh.
because there were some people who we employed as trackers, as part of like a different study, who used to live in the bush. And this is like, I don't know, like where we were, I considered it the bush because I basically lived in a tent. But no, it was like the bush. They're like a nomadic tribe. And but they, they like call, the Botswana government was like, hey, you can't hunt anymore. You can't live as you have lived for the past 10,000 years. So a lot of them were like, all right, fuck it, like we'll just live in a village now. But there were some people who still like lived in the bush and they just subsisted on um, vegetables and fruits that they would find.
Hmm.
But I'm not gonna narc on them if they, want to kill a warhog.
Yeah,
That's how they've been living for 10,000 years.
just to clarify, yeah, we do have oryx. It's in the western United States, and if you look up White Sands National Park, they're all over that place too. And I'm looking at the spelling now; it's kind of cool. It's Hemsbach, but it's spelled Gimsbach, so it's kind of neat.
Yeah,
So
I think
it
it's
is
Dutch or Afrikaans.
okay. Very neat. Very neat.
Yeah, and I have some larger. I can show some antelopes too. So here, we have some kudu, and these are like deer.
Yeah.
This was on a sunset game drive, I think. And here, these are gazelles or antelope. And then, oh,
They're
I
cute.
love small birds bathing. I find it's so adorable. So, it's rainy season. This is just like in the road, and there's all these like sparrows bathing. I just sat there for like 30 minutes saying, oh, how cute, and taking photos.
So
I
so
like
far
the
the
beach.
photos are super flat. Like the land is really
Uh-huh.
flat. Is how
Uh-huh.
far can you see really far? Like
Yeah,
it's a
yeah, yeah,
stupid
yeah, yeah,
question,
yeah.
but
Yeah. Hold
yeah.
on. Let me scroll
Could you
through.
imagine running? Oh, you'd
Yeah,
get so
here.
bored. A mile
Well,
in.
there was
Yeah,
um
right.
there was this one there's this one area, this one water hole where it's flat, like no vegetation at all. And I just like I had the urge to just like run, but it's like, okay, I also have a strong sense of survival. So, I wouldn't want to get like, taken down while doing that. But it's just like it's pretty flat. There are like some hills, but it's mostly flat. As you can kind of like make out from this photo. But here's I think it's a Cape Cobra that came into the camp. And then there's like a mama squirrel trying to like lure it away from its babies. Giraffe.
How often
And
were you in danger when you were out here?
never.
Never?
Well, there was one time where I was like, it's possible. And yeah. So these are some juvenile lionesses that we saw. So these look huge, right?
Right.
Like I know there's
Mhm.
like very little sense of scale because you don't know how like the
It's no
size of like the
banana.
shrubs,
Right.
but like they look huge. They're juveniles. They still have a lot of growing to do. And they were, I don't know, maybe like 20 yards away. So not in like danger. Plus I was in a car. And here's like another juvenile that they were hanging out with, probably from the same like litter. This is a lion that was, I think, just like lying in the shade. Because we were on our way to, we were tracking a male lion who we were interested in collaring. And he was like, we knew that he was around because there was a female he was hanging out with, who we had collared, and we had seen them. Another research team had like seen them together. So this is the lion that we ended up tranquilizing and then later collaring. And I feel like this was when I felt like the most in danger. Was like, you have this like sedated animal like in front of you, but you don't know how long it's gonna last, right? Because it's like it's so variable. It depends on like the animal's like metabolism, like what's its heart rate like at the time. Did the vet get the dose right before it tranquilized? So but that was hold on, let me get some more from that calling session. So we like, collected some blood samples, some, like just morphological measurements. This is me. So I like love just to brush animals that I come across. So that's like me using a brush that I later threw away. like brushing it. And I feel like this was the most in danger, second to when I had to collect camera trap data from a site that recently had a kill.
Mm.
So the study lasted like about a year, and we, after like, I don't know, 8 or so months, we finally got a kill on the camera traps, and it's pretty neat. But I'll show that. So this is the big boy right before he took a little nap ski and got a new piece of jewelry.
So, despite them being yeah, big cats, do you ever
Uh-huh.
have this really high urge to go pet them while they're awake?
While they're awake, no, but there was I did pet a
I did as I was
leopard.
watching the photo.
I did pet a leopard because there was a leopard that was tranquilized.
Grateful.
And so soft. But lions like kind of coarse. It's more like petting like a pit bull, like kind of that
Okay.
coarse hair. But the leopard is more like a cat feeling where it's like very soft. And apparently, this pack, so they're on the road, and we were able to get like a vet out in time to tranquilize one of them and put a collar on. Apparently, wild dogs stink. Um, so I was not able to be part of this because my permit wasn't ready in time. But this is a collared leopard that we were just
Wow, it's pretty.
observing, just making sure that like, it was okay. And I think that's all. Here's more Cape Coral. This is lioness out. So this you can kind of see like it's all
Yeah,
just
that
like
thing's
flat,
massive.
Yeah, that's insane. So,
right?
in this area, did you have any cheetahs out there?
No cheetahs.
Okay.
I'm not sure why, but there weren't any.
Hmm.
And so elephants I heard were pretty rare because they're very like water intense animals, as are wildebeest. And I only saw them like once or twice, and they
Hmm.
hung out in like, the greener areas. And then they just like, kind of leave. They get their water and then they migrate. Zebra is also super rare because they're more like water intense.
It- they're much leaner than I thought they would be. Those wildebeest.
It's also the dry season.
Okay.
So they're, running on fumes more or less. Like you can kind of tell. Let me see. Let me annotate this. Like their hips, like it's kind of like pointy right there. Because if
Yeah.
they're like, more plump, it'll be like rounder rather than just like so angular. Like you can really see it on this one, how it's like pretty angular versus like it would be like more. It would have a badonk if it was during the wet season. And there's a wild dog kill I wanted to show you. So this pack of wild dogs, and it's not wild dogs. It's gonna take a little bit to render because it's a lot of photos. This pack of wild dogs, they are not like wild domesticated dogs that have escaped. It's like its own species. So this pack rolled up on this water hole. This is an artificial one. You can kind of tell by like the edges that it's, man-made. And they come in, and you can see a few puppies here, little pups, and then like some juveniles also. And they just come in for a drink, and then okay, so they come around like 7:26, and then at 7:42, it's a little bit hard to make out, but here's a kudu, and then here's an adult chasing it. So because wild dogs are so stinky, what we think happened is that, the kudu came for a drink. The wild dogs were downwind of it. So dogs could smell the kudu, but the kudu couldn't smell the dogs. So it was caught unawares. And they basically, like the dogs just like kind of chased it around the water hole, like trying to like just tire it out until it's a lot weaker. So I think it started at like 7:42 p.m. You know, like the dogs on the shore probably like yipping. And I think it took around like 20 minutes to down it. Yeah, so around like 8:05, you can kind of make out in this corner that like there's something down right there.
So Kuda's only line of defense is to run, right?
The run kick, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was paying attention also to the time at the top and the temperature. Like
Mhm.
it was 33 degrees
Celsius,
Celsius
yeah, it was
like
pretty warm.
10 minutes ago, and then it dropped 2 degrees in like 5 minutes, or maybe even
Yeah,
less.
yeah.
That was crazy.
So dry season, so not super humid, so there's not a lot of like dampening of temperature fluctuations. And yeah. You can kind of make out like down here that there's
And
like
this is
a
January. That's January, right? January
yeah,
9th.
southern hemisphere though, so
Oh,
it's opposite.
yeah. Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
So was the kill still there when you came to collect the camera?
When I came to collect it, it wasn't, but we're still concerned. I think the carcass was there.
Hmm.
So, they're feasting throughout the night, and typically dogs don't stay near a kill this long. And you'll see why in a second. Oh yeah, it's down to like 21 degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it went down to 19 for a second, and then it just like popped back up.
Oh, yeah, his little
Yeah.
meats.
There's a little chunk there.
We have the meats. I love that, like, you can kind of get the sense that like they're wagging their tails as they're eating, which I find very endearing. Like, yeah, they're just
So
like regular dogs.
are they hostile to humans, or are they kind of like coyotes where they try to stay away from humans?
Try to stay away. I think like in general, like if animals feel threatened, or they'll try to like stay away from you. Like the leopard that you saw earlier, where it had the collar on it.
Yep.
It was we had a spare tire on top of the truck, and it was like attacking that. It would like lunge at the car. It was wild. It was so fast, so strong. Like it shook the car as it did it, just because it felt threatened. It's like leopards are solitary animals. They are, it's like it sees this like giant thing that's like not leaving it alone. Um, so it felt threatened, so it attacked the car.
So did y'all go around with a guide?
Not like a guide, but like we employed trackers, so people who used to live like in the bush,
Okay.
and they would, tell us about like, they're like it was especially important for the other study about like kill sites and
Mm.
like group dynamics, because they would like go to a kill site and they could read the tracks because it's sand. They could see like the footprints in the sand and kind of like say like, okay, like it's a lion, two attempts at taking it down, one from this side, one from this side. This one's like probably like a male or whatever. And then, brown hyena came later. So they can kind of piece together like how like the animal was killed
That's
and
neat.
who feasted on it. So now it's morning, and I think at around in a couple of hours, player 2 logs on.
So do you know if wild dogs kind of behave like coyotes, where if you eradicate a pack of coyotes, another pack of coyotes would just move in, so you can never really get rid of all of them?
I feel like that's how it is with predators in general. I wouldn't say it's like specific to coyotes. I'd say like maybe in like North America, that's how it works because
That's
we
why we
killed
have
off
them.
everything else. Yeah, we
Right.
killed off everything else. But I'd say that, as like a niche is freed, that like, something else will like fill the vacuum. And that's kind of what the like the ranchers like struggle with, is that like, that they're, as people are, deciding to make a living off of like ranching and herding, that now they're like abutting with territories that were like historically for apex predators. So then how do you balance like having ranchers but also like having like preserving your natural resources, right? Yeah,
Oh,
so around 6:08, the lion comes up and basically steals the kill.
Breakfast.
Yep. And so when I when I came a week later, they had dragged this over to this spot onto the bank, and it was just like a pile of bones. But I remember getting out of the car, and the tracker who I was with, he said a blessing in Kalahari. And he just said, like, like, we're just here for some data. Please be kind to us. We're here to respect you and honor you. And I
So were the
think,
trackers not armed?
no,
Oh,
none of us were armed.
okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can see it. Just
Yep.
like this massive creature that was like killed, just being dragged, no problem, by one lion.
Yeah.
By like, just by like the skin on like its, like probably by its like ass or something. But yeah, just like dragged over there, and then didn't want to get its paws wet while it feasts. Just like incredible. And this lion is not even fully grown.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So the lions that you see there, are they a lot leaner and smaller than like ones you see in captivity?
Like in the zoo?
Yeah.
Definitely not as fat. It was pretty cool to, wake up in the middle of the night for a couple weeks in a row and hear, like, because like lions were roaring. And I think that was like around the time that we had collared that big male. So it might have been him that I heard.
That is cool. So now you stayed about a year in Africa, right?
Only a few months, like maybe like a
That's
quarter or
right.
so. Yeah.
So was it worth it?
I'd say yes, without a doubt. Like even though it was like it was so hard on my body. Um, like my body type, like my surface area to volume ratio is not ideal for the heat. Like there
Or the
were
code,
like
apparently.
yeah. I just like I'm fucked. I will not handle extremes. I will die when the climate catastrophe happens.
Which one did you
So
enjoy more, Africa or Alaska?
it's so different. I cannot say, like, they're both of the experiences are so dear to me that I like they're like so a lot of like what a lot of people say about Africa is that like people who live there is that it doesn't ever leave you. And I definitely feel like my experience there, even though like it was so hard, like emotionally and physiologically, like it's never going to leave me. And there's something about just like living in the wild, living amongst animals, living where like you are not the dominant species, where you have to be, you really have to like honor and respect like the animals there. Um, that was a very like humbling experience. And I feel like, people should have more of that.
I might be
Actually,
stereotyping here. Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
oh no, I was so that kind of brought up the other question I had for you. Like, did you get like a paradigm shift during your Alaska and Africa trip? Like, was there a certain point you were like, you know what, life changed for me. Like this aspect of my life, the way I live my life, is no longer the same because of these two or this one event. Did you ever have
Um,
that moment?
hmm. I don't think so, because I've always been very, I don't crunchy granola in a way. Like I went to UC Berkeley. I was always like big on recycling, even though recycling is a sham. Um, and it was more like I respect the natural world even more. So not necessarily like a paradigm shift, but just like just to be in awe of the natural world more than I was.
So, okay, since we're running short on time, I do want to know a couple of things here. Is that I know I'm stereotyping here because biology is very broad,
Yeah.
but I
But
know that
also, we can go over time too. It's not a big deal.
okay, I know a number of kids get into biology, and as aspiring biologists, they want to become wildlife biologists. They want to become environmental scientists.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
I was going to ask you what advice you
Don't
could
do
give
it.
them, but I think that that was your advice. So,
Don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, like it's romantic, right? Like, oh,
right.
I would live in the bush. I would study animals. Like, okay, like every fucking kid goes to the zoo, watches Lion King. You like, the animated one or the one with Beyonce, and they're like, I want to do this like full time. Like, no, don't fucking do it, man. Because like it's so saturated. Like you have these like charismatic animals. Everyone wants to study them. There's not enough money to go around. Also, there's not enough like not everyone's gonna have a great idea for a study either. So like, is it likely that you'll get something? Probably not. So, and that's like kind of why I pivoted to software engineering because, like, as an environmental scientist, I was at the point where it's like, okay, to do what I want to do, I would have to get an advanced degree,
Mhm.
and it would either cost me 4 to 6 years of my life as like a PhD student, or cost me, 50 grand as like a master's student, and I would make 2,000 more, if that.
Right. Right.
But so it was just like not worth it to me. I can find other ways of, you know, learning, being in a perpetual state of learning.
So what
But
was
definitely like it's not worth it because, to get as you said, like, at the beginning of the episode, that you don't see a lot of, people with just a biology degree who are like doing these things.
Mhm.
And because you can't, it's like there's a lot of gatekeeping in, like, with ivory towers, that, like, in order to get access to this kind of stuff, you have to like have this kind of degree from this kind of place, or have like this kind of funding. um and it's just like it's unlikely that you'll get something. And then, like, what, once you're done with your PhD, where you like lived in the bush for 2 years and then analyzed data for four, like, what the fuck are you gonna do after that? Like, what, are you gonna work at a zoo? Like, this isn't like a full-time gig, so I would say, like, don't do it. Like, it's like, make money and then go on safari.
So
uh,
what was life like after Africa? Were you in a zoo?
no, so after Africa, so I intended to be there like a year, but I was like, you know what, this isn't for me, like, for a lot of reasons, not just like physiological. Um, and so it was rare for me to come back from something but not have something else lined up. So I was just kind of like bumming it for like a year and a half. Like, I was tutoring part-time. I loved it. I love tutoring. I love telling snotty rich kids why math is important and that their super rich dad is wrong, but also don't tell your dad that because I need a job. And like, you pet their dogs for like for like, an hour. You get paid. It was pretty chill. Talk about math, talk about SAT math. Um and I did that for like a year and a half. Like, it was hard because I was like, I'm in my mid-20s, I'm living at home. I can't afford to like be an adult. And I did a lot of lateral comparison because at the time, like, I had friends who right out of college, they had jobs like career jobs, and now they're like in business school, or they're finishing law school, or, oh, I'm halfway through, med school. And I was just like, I'm living with my aunt because my mom doesn't have space in her house for me because she rents out the room to college kids. So then for about a year and a half, while I was waiting for like this environmental scientist job with the city of Los Angeles to open up, and to get it, like, I was just kind of like bumming it a little bit. Not very glamorous. Sorry, listeners.
It's hilarious how we went from like this romantic scene in Alaska and this romantic scene in Africa to it completely turning upside down.
However, I will say, one time my aunt, like, I came home from tutoring, I had a full day of tutoring, and she said, "There's fried chicken in the fridge if you're hungry." So when you say it's not romantic, please hold that criticism.
So okay, but looking back on it, was it worth that year and a half that you spent in both areas to just have that experience? You said that
Yeah,
Africa never leaves you, right?
right.
So yeah, is it? Do you hold the fond memories more than you hold the emotional and the physiological and all the challenges that you
Yeah.
went through when you're in those positions?
I definitely feel like even the challenges, I'm very fond of them, because like, now that, after graduating from boot camp, and I intended to have like a job like right afterwards, but I don't. Just thinking like, okay, like, yeah, it's like not a big deal to like not have a job. Like, I've been poor before. I've like, lived through so much. And I'm like, my experiences are so unique. Like, I don't think it's like that big of a deal just to like, chill for a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I do think that, like, as like, to trade like a year and a half of doing like really cool like field biology stuff to, um, to feeling like I'm like barely treading water, like career wise, I would like take both. Yeah.
That's
I feel
cool.
like both are very like worthwhile experiences. I definitely appreciate, having money, like having my material conditions like provided for, um, while also, having like these incredible experiences.
So going back to what you said earlier, and let's flesh this one out real quick because your advice to any aspiring biologists, don't do it, right? But if they're
Yeah.
they're stuck in it and if they have a biology degree, is it
Uh-huh.
worth for them to go get that advanced degree? Because my wife, she's a microbiologist. She's about to finish
Right.
up her master's for probably an extra $2,000 a year, right? And
Right.
you're right about that. So for you, looking back on it, do you think it would be worth it for somebody still in their early career to go after that advanced degree?
So it honestly depends. So because I did like ecology, population kind of like level stuff versus like microbiology, I'd say it's worth it for like microbiology for sure.
Hmm.
Although, if you want to be a grifter like Elizabeth Holmes, like you don't even need a 4-year degree. But definitely like for microbiology, it's at worth at least like a master's. But it also like kind of just depends on what you want to do. Like there's I forgot like what kind of like clinical lab program is at like UCSF. It's like some like training program that's basically like, hey, if you didn't get into med school, go through this for like a couple of years and then you can make it like base pay of like 80K, which at the time like seemed like a lot, but because of, all the tech bros in San Francisco Bay Area, like it's chump change, right? So there are like advantages to going like the micro route. Um, but if you want to like couple it with like wildlife biology, you should do something that is some aspect that has like funding, um, and that
You
way
could
like
go
you can do
back.
both.
Would you change your major?
No, definitely, I would not change my major. Like
Okay.
I chose it, I suffered a year, I crammed that major in, and it was like the hardest experience of my life, but
Mhm.
like just like how incredible like my life has been. Like I would have never been able to throw up on a boat in the middle of the Bering Sea while like, covered in fish guts it had not been for that biology degree or like, pet a lion, take stupid photos with it, I mean, oh, except like, at those like shady places where they sedate the shit out of them. That's a little different. But yeah, like I wouldn't exchange it like for anything except I don't know, maybe my ex-husband.
So Cynthia, when she got her biology degree, she wanted to be a wildlife biologist, and she almost landed a job as a ranger. But
Oh.
part of the job description was cleaning toilets at the park, at the
Oh
state
yeah, yeah,
park.
yeah. Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
She
yeah.
was like, "No, I'm out."
It's a toilet.
Yeah.
Come
So,
on.
so that's so she changed her path. But what I didn't know you did a triathlon. That's really cool because
It was what not a melee, but like I forgot what it's called where you do the different parts. I just did the bike part.
oh yeah, so you did the different legs of it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
so
yeah.
are you a cyclist?
I
Mhm.
was I have always like just like loved like as a kid, you love riding your bike. And then when I started dating my husband or my soon-to-be ex-husband, he was a triathlete. And I was like, okay, this is a perfect I feel like this is a perfect opportunity for me to like finally like, bite the bullet and get a bike. So I got a bike and what we did a lot on the weekends because, he was still in school and I didn't want to pay for everything. I was like, let's just ride our bikes. And I lived in El Segundo at the time. And there's a Marvin Broad Trail that goes like along the beach, and then it hooks up with Bayona Creek Trail that goes like along Bayona Creek, eventually hooks up with the LA River. So you can go like super inland all the way to like San Gabriel Valley along that trail. And we'd like, ride our bikes in like Palos Verdes too. When we went to Spain, we rode our bikes in Girona. In Girona, they love to say, "Did you know that Lance Armstrong lived here so that he could train?" And this is like, after all like the doping stuff. So it's still like, a source of pride for them. And like the roads there are beautiful. Like Catalonia is so beautiful. Like if you play Settlers of Catan with like, like if you look at the tiles, especially the ones for wheat. It's like I would see like just like bales of like wheat like during our bike ride.
Andy was just in Barcelona.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. I didn't get to really explore the Catalonia region, but we spent a lot of time in Barcelona. I would love just to go back to just check out Catalonia in general. But yeah, no, Barcelona is gorgeous. I completely agree with you. Like, I wanted to be able to run over in the mountains. We went to Mount Juic, and I would have loved just to spend a day there and just run through the trails.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Roads are so well maintained. If you're a cyclist, I definitely suggest going to Girona. They have these you're basically like your own tour guide. Like they give you a GPS and they say like here's the route. Like just select this option and then like you just write it yourself. And oh, to rent a carbon fiber bike, it was only 25 euros for the whole 2 days. 25 years.
Wow,
Can you
2 days.
can you
That's
imagine?
awesome.
That's so cheap. Like here,
Yeah.
like at like in like Santa Monica, that would have cost me like 200 something dollars.
Yeah,
Jeez.
I don't even think you can rent a road bike here in Atlanta. I don't think that's a thing here.
Yeah.
So
Can't hear,
that's,
but they're not carbon fiber.
yeah,
I don't even know
probably
where to
like
go to rent a carbon fiber bike in
probably like
DC.
pot metal or something. Aluminum at best.
Yeah, they get a
Th-
lot of tourists who come in who want to either like uh you know bike along the trails or the roads in Girona or do the Tour de France, like follow along the Tour de France, like or do the Tour de France but like after.
So okay, the reason why I asked you about triathlon is because I think it'd be really cool to have you back on here when we're doing a running and a cycling. And yeah, Andy and I, we had discussed doing a triathlon in the near future in the future too. And I think it'd be awesome to have you back on, Denise.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I like talking to you. That's why we spent like so much time
Well,
in
we
boot
were kind of
camp.
forced to. No,
I would say like forced. I could
yeah,
have left the breakout room as I
right.
have done before at
Yeah.
any time.
No, today was really interesting. When you built that project with the wildlife photos, I had no
Uh-huh.
idea they were yours, and
Yeah.
to come find out that they were yours was really cool, and it was really neat that you came on here and shared that experience with us,
Yeah.
and to tell those mangy kids to not go after a biology degree is
Well,
probably the
okay,
smartest
so
thing that they can.
it's yes
It's
and
fair.
no. It's like so do a biology degree, but then like have like other things in mind, like with what you could do, like be open-minded because think about like how you can apply your biology degree to things that people need. So everybody needs to flush their toilets, right? So as an environmental scientist, I worked for like the wastewater division, where like, we like sewage comes in and it gets processed and eventually like the outgoing stuff needs to get tested or released somewhere. It's like either into a river, a lake, or into the ocean in my case. So before it gets released, it has to be tested to make
Yep.
sure that it meets like certain chemical standards or certain like environmental science standards. Like it can't kill like this test organism at this concentration over like this amount. So you just think about like, okay, like what can you do instead? Like, yeah, you can, like, I am very thankful for that year I spent in my professor's lab. Like, it definitely like changed my life, if not like saved my life, because like I was able to like escape poverty by getting a job with the government. So government, not so bad. Really great benefits, but also boring as shit. And that's why I was happy to quit.
Well, um, Andy, you got anything else for Denise? If not, we're going to give her the last word.
No, I'm actually really excited about you joining us for a fitness episode. I will be able to actually converse a bit more. I don't know as much about the science world as I do with fitness in general. But yeah, no, thanks for coming on. And
Yeah.
I'm excited about you joining us for a fitness episode.
Yeah,
Well,
I can come on anytime, whatever. I can fill in for who I'm the new co-host.
so here's what's really cool because Matt wanted to pick up cycling and he just started picking up running too. So I think you would be a pretty good inspiration for him. But you just told us that you had a shitty job because you work with shit. So
Yeah,
uh,
literally a shitty job.
literally
Yeah,
shitty
at the
job.
shit factory.
You got any last words for our listeners about just kind of going after those experiences and
Yeah.
maybe even why you transition into a completely opposite career, a completely different career than what you were in.
Yeah, I'd say that like when you're young, it is cool to chase those dreams, but also keep in mind that, like, that was like 10 years ago, and student loan debt is a thing. I was very lucky in that I didn't have, hundreds of thousands. It was like, I don't know, maybe like 24,000 in student loan debt. Um, and unfortunately, like, you have to choose between um following your dream or making like a compromise. Like, can you just, do something else where like your dream can be like a hobby? Like, my old manager at the shit factory said that, like, because he describes himself as a marine biologist. And so when he would go scuba diving, he would, be scuba diving with, lawyers and doctors who would say like, oh, like as a kid, like I wanted to be a marine biologist. And my boss would say like, yeah, and I'm sure now that you're like a doctor, lawyer, whatever, you've gone scuba diving a ton more times than I have. So can you just turn what you like into like a hobby? Like, can you do like citizen science? Can you just like volunteer at your local like, arboretum or something, instead of making it your job? Because, it doesn't pay well. Let's be real. Like, even like government jobs, I think like for like park ranger stuff, like that's maybe like 60 grand, and you'd have to live in the park. It's definitely not glamorous. And yeah, I would say don't do it unless you don't need to be concerned about money, like you've got like rich parents or whatever.
Well, no, that's cool. For a second there, I couldn't figure out when you said your ship boss, I couldn't, or something like that. I
A
couldn't
boss at the
tell you were
shitty
saying ship
factory.
boss or ship factory or shit factory. I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
no, very cool. So, Andy, what do we got for next episode, man?
Oh, well, I thought we were going to go through running like we had discussed. So if we're still cool with running, we can do that. But yeah, that's kind of on the books right now. Like I just started getting back to my regimen, so figured we can just take a deep dive and make fun of my my past data.
Oh, you still do pretty well, man, especially compared to Matt. But
You mean
Denise,
actually run?
it's right. So we do this every other week.
Okay.
And next in 2 weeks, we're going to do one on running. If you would love to join us, we would love to have you. I think it would be awesome to have another person talking about running and somebody who's done a marathon, even if it's a leg in the marathon. It'd be really cool because now that you mention it, Andy, since I can't swim, it's a great idea for us to do a marathon where we do one leg each.
So you can't swim, but you have a scuba diving license,
Yeah, I
right?
dive all the time.
Yeah, okay.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I when I got my dive license, I didn't know how to swim, and I just didn't tell my
Oh my
instructor.
God, what's up with you people? I just don't understand.
All right, guys. So till next time.
Okay, thanks,
we'll
guys.
check in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.